Before we dive in, take a moment to imagine this. Imagine waking up one morning and discovering that something completely ordinary, something you see every day, has suddenly become the most valuable object in your life. A flower, a website, a digital coin, a startup that hasn't made a single dollar. Imagine people around you talking about it nonstop. Your coworkers, your friends, your neighbors. Everyone convinced they found the secret doorway to wealth. And the only thing more terrifying than losing money is missing the chance to make it. This isn't a story about finance. It's a story about us, about why humans chase illusions, why we trust crowds more than logic, why we fall in love with ideas so intensely that we forget to ask what they're actually worth. Today, we're not just explaining market bubbles. We're dissecting the psychology that builds them, inflates them, and ultimately bursts them. So sit back, because the journey from tulips to tech is far stranger and far more human than you might expect. Most people think bubbles are something that happen to other people, to the greedy, the naive, the careless. But the truth is a lot stranger and a lot less comforting. Because financial bubbles don't grow out of stupidity. They grow out of something universal inside us. Something we all share. And that's why they keep happening again and again, from the tulip craze in the 1600s to the tech hype cycles we're living through right now. Today, we're going to explore what bubbles really are, why they form, why they always pop, and what they reveal about human nature in a way that's almost uncomfortably familiar. Let's start with a simple question. If we know bubbles are dangerous, why do people still jump into them? Why do entire societies lose touch with reality, forget the difference between price and value, and end up believing that wealth can be printed out of thin air? To understand that, we need to begin with the basics. A bubble is what happens when people stop buying something for what it is and start buying it for what they think someone else will pay later. It's a shift from intrinsic value to imagined value. And that shift sounds small, but it changes everything. Suddenly, logic doesn't matter. Fundamentals don't matter. All that matters is the belief that tomorrow someone will pay more than you did. And as long as enough people believe that, the price goes up. And as the price goes up, more people believe. It's a self-feeding loop that grows and grows until the tiniest pin can make it collapse. To really see how this works, we need to go back. Way back. To a time when the world was obsessed with something very strange: flowers. Specifically tulips. In 17th century Holland, tulips weren't just flowers. They were a symbol of luxury, exoticism, and wealth. When they first arrived from the Ottoman Empire, people were mesmerized. The colors, the patterns, the rarity. And for a while, tulips were simply expensive. But not insane. Then something changed, and that something wasn't the flowers. It was the people. As tulips grew more desirable, merchants, aristocrats, and even ordinary citizens began trading them. Some rare bulbs were sold for the cost of a house. Others were traded dozens of times before they even bloomed. Contracts were being flipped like lottery tickets. Prices were climbing, not because tulips were becoming more beautiful, but because people believed someone else would pay more next week. A sailor once mistaken a priceless tulip bulb for an onion and ate it for breakfast. That's how distorted things had become. An object worth a fortune could be confused with a vegetable. And then, just like that, confidence cracked. A few buyers backed out. Prices froze, panic spread, and in a matter of days, the entire market collapsed. Tulip bulbs that once cost a small fortune became worthless, not because the flowers changed, but because people's belief changed. A bubble had grown, and then it popped. This story sounds ridiculous now, and maybe it was. But what happened in the Tulip Mania wasn't unique. It was simply the earliest well-documented example of a pattern that repeats through history. A spark, a story, a surge of confidence. And then the inevitable collapse. Every bubble follows the same four-part cycle, no matter the century, the country, or the object being bought. It begins with innovation. Something new appears. Something people don't fully understand yet, but sense has enormous potential. It could be a new technology, a new business model, or simply a new idea. In the tulip craze, it was exotic flowers. In the 1990s, it was the internet. In the 2010s, it was cryptocurrency. And today, it might be artificial intelligence. Innovation creates excitement. It creates curiosity. But it also creates something more dangerous stories. Then comes euphoria. Prices rise. Success stories spread. A few early investors get rich. And suddenly, everyone wants in. Ordinary people start to believe they're missing out on easy money. FOMO kicks in. And the price is no longer tied to value. It's tied to emotion. The market becomes a theater where everyone believes they're the clever one, the one who will get out before the crash. But almost no one does. After that comes profit-taking. The quiet stage. The insiders, the skeptics, and the people who were never emotionally attached begin selling. Some take profits. Others exit because the numbers no longer make sense. They don't talk much. They don't boast. They simply slip out the side door while the music is still playing. The final stage is panic. A single unexpected event causes doubt. Doubt causes selling. Selling causes more selling. And the same crowd that pressured each other to buy now pressures each other to run. Prices collapse at speeds no one thought possible. Optimism turns into fear. Fear turns into regret. And when the dust settles, the bubble is gone, leaving behind stories, lessons, and losses. But to see the cycle more clearly, let's look at a more modern example. One that shaped the world we live in today, the dot-com bubble. In the late 1990s, the internet was the new frontier. Humanity had just discovered the digital universe, and it felt limitless. Anything with .com in its name could raise millions of dollars. Startups with no profits, no business models, and sometimes no products at all were receiving massive valuations. Investors didn't ask how a company would make money. They just assumed it would figure something out later, because that's what the future looks like. Pets.com became the poster child of this era. It sold pet supplies online, burned money on ads, grew rapidly, and collapsed spectacularly. There was a company whose mascot was a sock puppet, but whose business model had enormous holes in it. Yet, for a moment, people believed. They believed because everyone else did. When the bubble burst in the year 2000, trillions of dollars in market value evaporated. Companies disappeared overnight. Investors went bankrupt. And the internet went through a dramatic reset. But here's the twist. The technology itself didn't fail. The internet wasn't a scam. In fact, the real value of the internet emerged more strongly after the bubble popped. Google, Amazon, and many of the tech giants we rely on today grew in the aftermath, not during the hysteria. That's the strange thing about bubbles. They're almost never about fraud or fake technology. They're about our unrealistic expectations of real technology. They happen when our imagination gets ahead of reality. Crypto followed a similar path. Bitcoin introduced a groundbreaking idea, decentralized digital money. But soon, thousands of coins appeared. Meme coins, joke coins, empty projects with shiny websites and promises of revolution. For a while, prices soared. Everyone became an investor. People quit their jobs to trade tokens. But eventually, reality returned. And as it always does, the bubble popped for thousands of those coins. Tech startups have had their own bubbles too. Companies valued not on profits, but on potential. Growth-first business model later became a mantra. Money was cheap. Investors were enthusiastic. And valuations climbed far beyond what revenue could justify. Today, we're watching a new cycle form around artificial intelligence. This time, the technology is undeniably powerful. It is transforming industries. But the pattern of hype is beginning to look familiar. Companies add AI to their pitch decks and raise millions. Startups with little more than prototypes receive staggering valuations. And once again, the story feels bigger than the reality. At least for now. But why do bubbles keep happening? Why don't we learn? Why do smart people, educated people, rational people repeat the same mistakes century after century? The answer comes down to human psychology. The first force is FOMO, fear of missing out. When everyone else seems to be getting rich, it becomes almost painful to stay on the sidelines. Your brain whispers, what if this really is the opportunity of a lifetime? What if you're the only one too scared to act? FOMO pushes people to buy, not because they believe, but because they don't want to be left behind. The second force is greed, but not in the cartoonish sense. It's more subtle. It's the belief that you deserve a better life, that you deserve financial freedom, that this might finally be the moment when things change for you. Bubbles don't prey on stupidity. They prey on hope. The third force is herd behavior. Humans are social creatures. When we see large groups doing something, our brains assume they know something we don't. It's a shortcut wired into the mind. If enough people buy tulips or .com stocks or crypto or AI startups, it must be safe. Right. And so the crowd grows, and the bubble inflates. When you combine these three forces, something fascinating happens. People stop thinking individually and start behaving collectively. They merge into a single emotional organism driven by optimism on the way up and fear on the way down. And once that shift occurs, fundamentals no longer matter. Reality becomes optional. And illusions become extremely profitable. At least for a while. So how can you recognize a bubble before it's too late? There are 3 signs that appear almost every time. The first sign is price rising faster than value. If something becomes dramatically more expensive without any change in what it does, produces, or solves, that's a warning. Tulips didn't suddenly become more nutritious. .com companies didn't suddenly become profitable. Meme coins didn't suddenly create utility. The story changed. But the thing itself didn't. The second sign is people buying just because everyone else is buying. When investors stop talking about fundamentals and start talking about momentum vibes, or the community that's a clue. When people admit they don't know what they're buying, but feel confident anyway, danger isn't far. And the third sign is disproportionate optimism. When people say things like this time is different, it rarely is. History never repeats exactly, but it rhymes. Every era thinks it's too smart to fall for a bubble. Every era believes it's special. And every era learns the same lesson the hard way. The point of understanding bubbles isn't to mock the past. It's to recognize that each bubble reflects something about us. Our desires, our fears, our dreams, and our illusions. Bubbles are stories of human psychology as much as they are stories of markets. They are mirrors. And sometimes the reflection is uncomfortable. But here's the hopeful part. Bubbles also push innovation forward. The tulip craze left scars, but it also helped create early futures markets. The .com bubble wasted trillions, but it funded the infrastructure of the modern internet. Crypto bubbles created a mess, but they also accelerated the development of blockchain technology. And perhaps the AI bubble will eventually give us tools we can't even imagine yet. The key is remembering that technology is real, but hype is temporary. The story ends, but the progress remains. So the next time you see a new trend rising, and everyone around you is convinced it's the next big thing, pause for a moment. Look past the excitement. Notice the psychology. Notice the tempo. Notice the belief that it can only go up. And ask yourself the one question that has saved countless people from financial ruin. Are people buying value? Or are they buying a story? Because bubbles come and go. But the lesson they teach is always the same. The market isn't irrational. People are, and sometimes we're irrational in the exact same ways again and again. Bubbles aren't failures of economics. They're reminders of what it means to be human. If there's one lesson hidden inside every bubble, it's this. Markets don't lose their minds. People do. Not because we're foolish, but because we're hopeful. Because we want tomorrow to be better than today. Because the dream of easy wealth is sometimes louder than the whisper of caution. But if we learn to recognize the pattern, innovation, euphoria, profit-taking panic, something shifts. We stop getting swept away by the crowd. We stop confusing hype for value. And we start seeing markets for what they really are, stories written by millions of people trying to make sense of the future. So the next time you hear someone say, "This time is different," pause. Look closer. Bubbles always look revolutionary from the inside. But only reality survives the collapse. If you enjoyed this explanation and want to explore more hidden patterns behind the world, we live in technology, psychology, economics, and everything in between. Make sure to stick around. There's so much more to uncover. And as always, thanks for watching.